The air in the cultural rehabilitation facility smelled of antiseptic and fear. Lieutenant Ethan Cole sat on the edge of his metal cot, listening to the monotonous drone of the facility's orientation program playing on endless loop through the wall-mounted speakers. Welcome to the Galactic Alliance Rehabilitation Center. Your cooperation determines your survival. Remember, hierarchy is peace. Resistance is chaos. Ethan tugged at the thin gray jumpsuit they'd given him. The material itched against his skin, deliberately uncomfortable like everything else in this prison. Through the translucent barrier of his cell, he could make out the shadowy forms of guards patrolling the corridor, tall, scaled Zaclarians with their signature energy staffs. One paused outside his cell, reptilian eyes glowing in the dim light. "Morning, lizard eaters," Ethan said cheerfully, though he knew the universal translator would filter out his exact wording. "Beautiful day for a bit of cultural rehabilitation, isn't it?" The Zaclarian guard's scales rippled with annoyance. "Silence, human. Your species lacks the evolutionary capacity to understand true galactic civilization." Ethan stretched casually. Funny thing about evolution, it's full of surprises. He'd been in this cell for 23 days, or what felt like 23 days, since they'd confiscated his chronometer upon arrival. The first diplomatic mission to the Galactic Alliance had gone spectacularly wrong. What Earth had believed would be first contact negotiations had actually been a thinly veiled assessment of humanity's potential threat level. Apparently, they'd scored high enough to warrant immediate containment. The guard moved on, and Ethan's smile faded. He glanced toward the ventilation shaft, where he'd been carefully working loose a panel. 3 more days, maybe less, and he'd be able to access the maintenance tunnels. Not that he had any real escape plan yet, but options were always good. A soft knocking came from the wall to his right. 3 taps, pause, 2 taps. Dr. Isla Nowak, the xenoanthropologist who'd been captured alongside him, had established this rudimentary communication system. Ethan responded with the same pattern, letting her know he was listening. 1 long tap, followed by 3 short news. She must have gleaned something from the guards. He'd find out during their brief exercise period, assuming they were granted one today. The cell block door hissed open, and heavy footsteps approached. Ethan maintained his casual posture as an imposing Zaclarian officer stopped before his cell. The alien stood nearly 8 feet tall, its blue-purple scales shimmering under the artificial lights. The insignia on its combat armor marked it as a subcommander. Human. The translator rendered the word with particular disdain. "Tomorrow you fight." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "I wasn't aware I'd signed up for any sporting events." In the interstellar coliseum, the Zaclarian's mouth split in what might have been a smile, revealing rows of needle-like teeth. "You will face a Thar warrior. She will tear you apart within moments." The guard leaned closer to the barrier. "The Alliance High Council wants to study human combat capabilities. Your species claims to be peaceful diplomats, yet your historical records show endless warfare." An interesting contradiction. Ethan maintained his unconcerned expression. "Maybe we're just complex. Multifaceted. Or perhaps just primitive and deceptive." The Zaclarian's tongue flicked out. "The Thar warrior has personally requested to face a human. She believes your species has been incorrectly categorized as sentient." "Well, I'd hate to disappoint a lady," Ethan replied, keeping his tone light despite the implications. The Zaclarian made a guttural sound. "Prepare yourself, human. Tomorrow, you will demonstrate whether your species deserves consideration or extinction." With that, the guard turned sharply and strode away, leaving a sinking feeling in Ethan's stomach. The Galactic Alliance wasn't conducting cultural rehabilitation. They were staging gladiatorial spectacles to justify their treatment of humanity. An hour later, the cell barriers dimmed, signaling exercise period. Guards escorted prisoners into a circular chamber with high ceilings and reinforced walls. About 20 humans mingled with a handful of other species, mostly scientists and engineers who had been part of Earth's outreach mission. Dr. Isla Nowak made her way toward him casually, her gray-streaked black hair pulled back in a functional braid. She'd lost weight during their captivity, but her eyes remained sharp and analytical. "Lieutenant," she said quietly as they began the standard stretching routine expected of them, "I've been monitoring the guard shifts. There's something happening in the higher echelons of the Alliance." Ethan nodded slightly. "Any idea what?" "Conflict." She demonstrated a stretching pose, which Ethan mirrored. "The Zaclarians want to classify humanity as a potential threat species, which would authorize preemptive military action. But several other species, particularly the Exalians, are pushing back. Why would anyone in this charming little dictatorship care about us?" Isla's voice dropped lower. "Politics. The Zaclarians have been the military arm of the Alliance for centuries. Some species believe they've accumulated too much power." She switched to another stretch. "There's also talk of an Earth fleet approaching Alliance space." Ethan's movements faltered momentarily. "How reliable is that information?" "Uncertain, but I've picked up fragments from the guards' conversations. The translator struggles with their dialect, but I've been making progress." A guard approached, and they fell silent, continuing their exercises with deliberate focus. When the guard moved past, Isla whispered, "Be careful tomorrow. The Thar are elite warriors, bred for combat. They consider it an honor to die fighting." "Wonderful," Ethan muttered. "But they also adhere to strict honor codes," she added. "Use that if you can." Before they could speak further, the exercise period ended. As guards herded prisoners back to their cells, a different Zaclarian grabbed Ethan's arm, pulling him aside. "Special preparations for tomorrow's entertainment," the guard announced, pushing him down a separate corridor. They led him to a Spartan room containing a single metal bench and a wall-mounted display. The guard activated the screen, showing footage of various combat matches. "Study your opponent." The screen displayed a towering female Thar warrior with crimson scales and ridged horns running down her back. She moved with astonishing speed for her size, dispatching opponents with brutal efficiency. Each match ended with her standing triumphantly over the mangled remains of her adversary. "Kal Rana, 5-time champion of the Thar Dominion," the guard informed him. "She has killed 37 opponents in the Colosseum." Ethan studied her fighting style, noting patterns in her attacks, the slight favoring of her right side, the momentary pause before lunging forward. "She's requested human blood specifically," the guard added, clearly enjoying Ethan's predicament. "Prepare yourself. Morning comes quickly." As the guard escorted him back to his cell, Ethan caught a glimpse through a viewport of the sprawling Alliance outpost beyond the prison facility. Countless ships moved through the artificial atmosphere, representing dozens of species coexisting under the Alliance's strict hierarchical system. Somewhere out there, politics were shifting, alliances forming and breaking, all while he was being prepped like a sacrificial lamb. Back in his cell, the automated voice droned on. "Tomorrow you will fulfill your purpose in the Great Galactic Alliance. Your cooperation determines your survival." Ethan lay back on his cot, staring at the ceiling. "We'll see about that," he whispered to himself. Morning arrived with harsh lighting and the blaring of alarms. 2 Zaclarian guards entered Ethan's cell, binding his wrists with energy restraints that tingled uncomfortably against his skin. "Move, human," one ordered, prodding him with an electrified baton. "Your audience awaits." They marched him through winding corridors, eventually emerging into a massive subterranean transit tube. A sleek transport vessel waited, its doors open. Inside, other prisoners, most non-human, sat in secured seating, their expressions ranging from resignation to terror. The journey lasted perhaps 20 minutes before the transport slowed, docking with another facility. When the doors slid open, a cacophony of sounds flooded in, roars, cheers, and the pounding rhythm of what might have been ceremonial drums. The Interstellar Colosseum was a massive structure, combining elements of ancient Roman architecture with advanced alien technology. Glowing force fields replaced stone columns, and hovering platforms carried spectators of various species above the central arena. The floor itself was composed of adaptable terrain, currently configured as packed earth with scattered rocky outcroppings. Guards led the prisoners to a holding area beneath the stands. Through grated openings, Ethan could see sections of the audience, thousands of beings from across the galaxy, united in their bloodlust. On an elevated platform sat several ornately dressed figures, likely Alliance officials. Among them, a slender humanoid with iridescent skin and elongated features observed the proceedings with apparent detachment. "That's Curator Zal," a fellow prisoner whispered, a Cepheid researcher who'd been part of Ethan's diplomatic team. "An Exalian. They're the observer caste of the Alliance." Ethan nodded slightly. "Any advice for surviving this?" The Cepheid's multifaceted eyes blinked rapidly. "No one survives the Thar. I am sorry, Lieutenant." A tremor ran through the floor as massive doors at the far end of the arena opened. The crowd's roar intensified as a towering figure emerged. Kalrana stood 7 feet tall, her crimson scales glinting under the arena lights. Ornate armor covered her torso and limbs, leaving her powerful arms exposed. The twin horns protruding from her skull had been adorned with metal rings, and ceremonial patterns had been painted across her face. She raised her arms, absorbing the adulation of the crowd, then pounded her chest with a closed fist, a ritual challenge. The audience responded with thunderous approval. A Zaclarian official approached Ethan's holding cell. "Your weapons, human." He thrust forward a rack containing primitive implements, a spear, a blunted sword, and a small shield, all deliberately archaic, designed to maximize the spectacle rather than give him any real chance. Ethan selected the spear and shield, weighing them thoughtfully. The guard deactivated his restraints. "Remember," the Zaclarian said mockingly, "this is a cultural exchange. Show us what humanity is capable of." He laughed, the sound like stones grinding together. "For however long you last." A gate opened before him, and harsh light beckoned from the arena. Taking a deep breath, Ethan stepped forward into the blinding glare. The crowd's reaction was immediate, a mixture of jeers and curious murmurs. Most had likely never seen a human before. Compared to the imposing Thar warrior at the opposite end, Ethan appeared almost comically small and vulnerable. A hovering platform descended to the center of the arena, carrying a Zaclarian announcer. "Beings of the Galactic Alliance." The announcer's amplified voice boomed in multiple languages simultaneously. "Today we witness a special demonstration of interspecies combat prowess. From a Thar Dominion, Champion Kalrana." The crowd erupted as the warrior raised her weapons, a serrated blade and a spiked gauntlet. And her opponent, the announcer continued with noticeably less enthusiasm, a specimen from the unaligned world known as Earth, a human. The silence that followed was almost worse than jeering. Ethan realized they viewed him not as an opponent, but as a scientific curiosity, a primitive creature to be dissected through combat. The announcer ascended, and a resonant tone echoed through the arena, signaling the match's commencement. Kalrana immediately addressed the crowd. "Witnesses of the Alliance, today I demonstrate why these humans remain unworthy of consideration." Her voice carried naturally without amplification. "They are evolutionary mistakes, creatures of weakness disguised as diplomats." She turned her attention to Ethan. "Human slave, today you face a true warrior. Your species' deception ends with your blood on this sand." Ethan adjusted his grip on the spear. "Always nice to meet a fan," he called back, his voice sounding small in the massive space. "Though I think there's been a misunderstanding about the slave part." Kalrana's eyes narrowed. Without warning, she launched forward with startling speed, covering half the arena in seconds. Her blade slashed in a vicious arc toward Ethan's neck. Years of special forces training took over. Ethan dropped and rolled, feeling the weapon cut air where his head had been moments before. He came up behind her, jabbing the spear toward a gap in her armor near the kidney region. If Thar anatomy resembled the briefings he'd received. She twisted with unnatural flexibility, catching the spear shaft with her gauntlet hand. A triumphant snarl spread across her face, until Ethan let go of the weapon entirely, causing her to momentarily overbalance. In that split second, he slammed his shield into her knee joint, Kalrana stumbled, but recovered quickly, surprise evident in her reptilian features. Unexpected, she growled, but futile. She discarded his spear, drawing a second blade from her belt. With both weapons, she launched into a whirlwind attack, forcing Ethan to retreat. Her movements formed complex patterns, clearly a practice combat form designed to overwhelm opponents with its sheer unpredictability. Ethan focused on defense, using the shield to deflect blows while studying her technique. Every fighter had patterns, and Kalrana was no exception. Behind the savage aggression lay structure, and within structure lay vulnerability. 20 seconds into the fight, he saw it, a fractional hesitation after a specific combination, her weight shifting predictably as she reset her stance. The next time the pattern emerged, Ethan didn't retreat. Instead, he stepped into her attack at precisely the moment of transition. The move caught her completely off guard. Her blades missed their target, and Ethan drove his shoulder into her midsection, using her own momentum against her. As she staggered, he swept her legs, a simple combat maneuver taught to every Special Forces operative. Kalrana crashed to the ground with a thunderous impact. Before she could recover, Ethan had positioned himself above her, his foot pressing against a nerve cluster at the base of her throat, another detail from the xenobiology briefings that had apparently been accurate. The Thar warrior froze, feeling the pressure against her most vulnerable point. For the first time, genuine shock registered in her eyes. The arena had fallen completely silent. Not a single spectator made a sound as they processed the incomprehensible scene before them. A human standing victorious over a Thar champion, and in less than 30 seconds. Ethan maintained the pressure point, meeting Kalrana's gaze. "What was that about evolutionary mistakes?" he asked quietly. The warrior's expression contorted with rage and humiliation. "Finish it," she hissed. "Kill me, or I will hunt you until your final breath." The crowd had begun to murmur, expectant. This was the moment when victors claimed their bloody prize, when they demonstrated their superiority by taking the life of the defeated. Ethan stepped back, removing his foot from her throat. "No." The murmurs grew louder. "I don't need to kill an opponent who can no longer fight," he announced, projecting his voice. "That's not strength, it's just slaughter." Confusion rippled through the audience. On the official platform, Curator Zhao leaned forward with obvious interest, while the Zaclarian officials conferred urgently amongst themselves. Kalrana remained on the ground, processing this unprecedented situation. "You deny me warrior's death," she finally said, her voice hoarse with emotion. "This is the greatest dishonor." "Or maybe," Ethan replied, looking directly at the official platform, "it's just a different definition of honor." The hovering announcement platform descended rapidly. "This exhibition is concluded," the Zaclarian declared, clearly flustered by the unexpected outcome. "The specimen will be returned to containment for further evaluation." As guards rushed into the arena to secure both combatants, the crowd erupted into chaotic debate. Some spectators demanded Kalrana's execution for her failure. Others called for Ethan to be granted another match against a worthy opponent. A smaller faction seemed genuinely intrigued by his refusal to kill. The last thing Ethan saw before being dragged from the arena was Curator Zhao rising from the official platform, its iridescent eyes fixed on him with unmistakable curiosity. Back in the cultural rehabilitation facility, Ethan found himself relocated to a different cell, slightly larger, with improved amenities, including a proper bed and functional hygiene station. The walls remained transparent from the outside, but he had been given limited privacy controls. Over the next few days, he noticed subtle changes in his treatment. The food, while still unidentifiable, had actual flavor. Guards spoke to him rather than merely at him. Twice daily, he was escorted to a monitored exercise facility where he could maintain his physical condition. On the third day after the arena, a delegation of Alliance officials arrived to observe him through the cell barrier. They spoke in their native languages, apparently unconcerned that he might understand them. The translation implant he'd received upon first contact, which the Zaclarians had apparently failed to deactivate, picked up fragments. neural connectivity patterns unlike standard predictive models, combat efficiency exceeding Class 3 threat assessment, political implications if widespread capability. Among them stood Curator Zhao, who alone addressed him directly. Human Lieutenant Cole, your performance has raised interesting questions within the Alliance Council. Ethan sat on the edge of his bed, happy to keep things interesting. Your species was categorized as diplomatically oriented but militarily underdeveloped. This classification is now under review. The Exalien's voice remained neutral, but something like curiosity lingered in its opalescent eyes. More significantly, your refusal to execute a defeated opponent has created philosophical divisions among council members. Where I come from, we call that mercy, Ethan replied. And it's generally considered a virtue, not a weakness. Fascinating. Zhao tilted its elongated head. The Zaclarian faction views it as evidence of human unpredictability and therefore danger. Others see potential for alternative perspectives within Alliance structures. The delegation departed shortly after, leaving Ethan to contemplate the political currents swirling around humanity's fate. If Dr. Isla was right about an Earth fleet approaching, timing would be critical. The Alliance seemed divided on how to handle humanity, some advocating for extermination, others for study, perhaps a few for genuine diplomatic engagement. That evening, as he completed his final exercise session, a shadow fell across the training area. Ethan looked up to find Kalrana standing at the entrance, flanked by Alliance security officers rather than prisoners' guards. She had changed her armor for more formal attire, though still militaristic in design. The painted patterns had been removed from her face, revealing natural markings across her crimson scales. "Leave us," she ordered the security detail, who hesitated only briefly before complying. When they were alone, she approached Ethan with measured steps. "Human." Ethan straightened, setting aside the weight he'd been using. "Kalrana, you're looking well for someone who should be dead, according to your earlier statements." Her jaw tightened. "By Thar tradition, I should have died in that arena. Sorry to disappoint. You have placed me in a position of conflict." She paced the perimeter of the exercise area. "By our ancient codes, one who spares another in mortal combat creates a life debt. The defeated owes their continued existence to the victor's mercy." She stopped, facing him directly. "I find myself indebted to a species I considered vermin." Ethan smiled slightly. "Cognitive dissonance can be uncomfortable." "Do not mock me, human," she snapped, then visibly composed herself. "I have been tasked with understanding how you defeated me. The Alliance Council believes you employed some hidden technology or ability. Nothing so exotic, just training and observation." Kalrana's eyes narrowed. "You studied my movements. Everyone has patterns, even the best warriors. The difference between life and death is recognizing them before your opponent does." She absorbed this in silence, then abruptly asked, "Why did you not kill me?" The question hung between them. Ethan considered his answer carefully. "Killing should have purpose beyond spectacle," he finally said. "You were defeated. Killing you would have served no purpose except entertainment for a crowd that wasn't even my ally." "Purpose," she repeated, testing the concept. "Thar understand purpose. We kill to preserve honor, to secure dominance, to fulfill sacred oaths." She moved closer. "Your restraint suggests either supreme confidence or fundamental weakness. I have not determined which. Maybe neither. Maybe both." Their conversation was interrupted by the return of the security detail. Time expired, one announced curtly. Kalrana turned to leave, then paused. "This life debt complicates matters, Lieutenant Cole, but it may yet serve a purpose neither of us foresees." After she departed, Ethan was escorted back to his cell. Something had shifted in the power dynamics of his captivity. He was no longer merely a specimen, but had become a political variable in Alliance calculations. Late that night, as he lay on his bunk contemplating escape options, a nearly imperceptible vibration ran through the cell walls. The barrier before his cell flickered momentarily, then stabilized. Someone was interfering with the security systems. A slender figure materialized outside his cell. Dr. Isla Nowak, her face tense with urgency. "Lieutenant," she whispered as the barrier between them thinned to transparency. "I've hacked into a portion of their communications network. We don't have much time." Ethan moved to the barrier. "What have you found?" "The Earth fleet is real. 6 ships approaching the edge of Alliance space. Expected arrival within 2 weeks." Her eyes darted nervously toward the corridor. "But there's more. The Zaclarians are planning to use us as leverage or eliminate us before the fleet arrives, claiming we died from cultural incompatibility." Charming euphemism. "There's division in the Alliance Council. Your arena performance has accelerated political conflicts that were already simmering." She pressed a small object against the barrier, which phased through to his side. "Memory crystal. Contains partial schematics of the facility and communicates between council factions." "Hide it." Ethan palmed the crystal. "How did you?" "I was studying Xena communication systems before we made first contact. Their encryption is advanced but follows recognizable linguistic patterns." A distant alarm sounded, and she tensed. "They've detected the system breach. I need to go." "Isla, be careful." She offered a grim smile. "Try to stay alive long enough to write the definitive paper on first contact disasters." With that, she vanished into the shadows as the barrier re-solidified. Ethan quickly secured the crystal in a hidden pocket he'd created in his mattress. If what Isla said was true, the situation was accelerating toward crisis. The Earth fleet's approach would force the Alliance to make decisions about humanity's status, and divided political bodies often made their most dangerous moves when pressed for time. The following morning, Ethan was abruptly removed from his cell by a contingent of heavily armed guards. Not the usual Zaclarian security forces, but soldiers in formal Alliance military attire. They escorted him through unfamiliar sections of the facility until they reached an ornate chamber with a circular table surrounded by representatives of various species. Curator Zal stood as Ethan entered. "Lieutenant Cole, you have been summoned to provide testimony in an extraordinary session of the Regional Alliance Council." Ethan took in the assembled dignitaries. Besides Zal, he recognized several Zaclarian military leaders, a cluster of insectoid beings that might have been Harvex, and various humanoid species he couldn't immediately identify. Among them sat Kalrana, representing the Thar Dominion. "Testimony about what, exactly?" Ethan asked. A senior Zaclarian officer, distinguishable by elaborate markings on his azure scales, responded with barely contained hostility. "The human pretends ignorance while his species positions warships at our borders. General Vex Thor exaggerates." Zal interjected smoothly. "Exploratory vessels have been detected approaching Alliance space. Given recent misunderstandings regarding diplomatic intentions, this council seeks clarification." Ethan maintained a neutral expression. "I've been in your custody since arrival. I have no knowledge of Earth's current military positioning." "Convenient," Vex Thor hissed. "Just as it was convenient that your supposed diplomatic mission contained detailed scans of our defensive capabilities. Standard procedure for any unknown environment," Ethan countered. "The same way you scanned our ships when we entered your space." Before the general could respond, Zal raised a slender hand. "This session is not an interrogation, but an opportunity for dialogue. Recent events have raised questions about human capabilities and intentions that may be relevant to council decisions." A Harvex representative chittered briefly, and the translation system rendered, "The combat demonstration was statistically improbable. Explain methodology." Ethan glanced at Kalrana, whose expression remained carefully impassive. "I observed patterns in my opponent's fighting style and exploited a momentary vulnerability. Nothing more mysterious than that. And your refusal to claim victory through execution?" This from a diminutive being with crystalline features. "Unnecessary killing isn't part of my value system." This prompted a wave of multilingual murmurs around the table. Vex Thor slammed a clawed hand down. "Values. The human speaks of values while their planet's history drips with bloodshed. Their own archives document millennia of warfare. We've learned from our history," Ethan replied calmly. "That's what evolution is about. Not just physical adaptation, but cultural and moral development. Karana spoke for the first time. The human speaks truth about the combat. There was no deception, no hidden technology. I was defeated through legitimate tactical insight. Her admission clearly cost her pride, but her voice remained steady. Furthermore, by Thar tradition, his mercy has created a life debt between us. I am honor-bound to acknowledge this. The revelation sparked intense discussion among council members. Ethan noticed Zal observing the reactions with careful attention, particularly those of the Zaclarian delegation. After several minutes of heated debate in multiple languages, Zal called for order. The council recognizes these developments require careful consideration. Until consensus is reached, the human delegation will remain under protective custody rather than rehabilitation protocols. Protective custody sounds remarkably similar to imprisonment, Ethan observed. Security precautions remain necessary, Zal replied. However, conditions will improve and limited communication with other human detainees will be permitted. Vexthor rose abruptly. The Zaclarian protectorate objects. These humans represent an unquantified threat. Their vessels approach our space while we debate semantics. Your objection is noted, General, Zal responded evenly. But this council operates by consensus, not military directive. The tension between the two officials was palpable. For the first time, Ethan glimpsed the political fractures within the alliance. The military faction represented by the Zaclarians versus the administrative and diplomatic factions led by species like the Exalians. As the session concluded, Ethan was escorted from the chamber. In the corridor outside, he briefly made eye contact with Karana, who gave an almost imperceptible nod, acknowledgement of something neither fully understood yet. Back in his quarters, upgraded from cell to secure accommodation, Ethan finally had the opportunity to examine the crystal Dr. Isla had provided. Pressing it against the room's information terminal activated a secure interface, revealing fragmentary data about the facility, alliance communications, and political structures. The most valuable information concerned the division within alliance leadership. The Zaclarians had maintained military dominance for centuries, using threats of external enemies to justify their authority. Humanity's appearance, technologically advanced enough to reach interstellar travel but still relatively unthreatening, had created an opportunity for other factions to challenge Zaclarian control. Most interesting was a heavily encrypted communication from an entity identified as Observer Prime, apparently Zal's superior in the Exalian hierarchy. The message contained a single directive: assessment protocol activated. Potential reconfiguration imminent. Ethan wasn't certain what reconfiguration meant in this context, but it suggested the Exalians saw humanity's arrival as an opportunity for significant change within the Alliance. The crystal also contained partial schematics of the facility, enough to confirm his suspicions that they were being held in a diplomatic annex rather than a standard detention center. This explained the rapid transition from rehabilitation to council hearings. They never left the administrative heart of this Alliance outpost. A signal from the door announced a visitor. Ethan quickly deactivated the crystal and concealed it before acknowledging entry. Dr. Isla Nowak entered, looking haggard but determined. She'd been granted the same status upgrade, judging by her new attire, similar to Ethan's, but with scientific insignia rather than military markings. "You've caused quite the political firestorm, Lieutenant," she said, dropping into a chair. "Half the Alliance is debating whether humans represent evolutionary innovation or existential threat. I just beat one warrior in combat. Hardly seems like grounds for an existential crisis. It's not what you did, but how you did it." Isla leaned forward intently. These species have been locked in rigid hierarchical patterns for millennia. The strong dominate the weak. Victors eliminate the defeated. You introduced uncertainty into that equation. Ethan considered this. "You think we might have allies?" "Possibly." The Exalians seem most receptive. They're the observer caste, responsible for monitoring evolutionary and cultural developments across the galaxy. Your little display of mercy apparently triggered all sorts of interest in their circles. And the crystal you gave me? Were you able to extract more data? She nodded. The communications network is vast, but I've focused on military transmissions concerning Earth's fleet. They're monitoring its approach, but haven't yet decided whether to engage or establish contact. That gives us time. Limited time. General Vex Thor leads the hardline faction, pushing for immediate military response. He's arguing that humanity represents a pattern similar to historical threats the Alliance has faced. Ethan grimaced. We need to speak with Curator Zal directly. They're clearly orchestrating something beyond standard diplomatic procedure. Already arranged. Isla replied with a hint of pride. I've requested scientific consultation regarding human neurophysiology. Zal will attend personally tomorrow. Impressive. She shrugged. Xenoanthropologists are good at understanding cultural leverage points. The Exalians value knowledge above all else. Offer them new data, and they'll overcome most bureaucratic obstacles. What about Kalrana? This life debt concept could be useful. Thar honor codes are notoriously complex. The life debt creates obligation, but also resentment. She'll fulfill whatever duty it requires, but don't expect friendship. Isla rose to leave. Tomorrow with Zal is our opportunity to shape the narrative before the military faction forces a decision. After she departed, Ethan spent hours reviewing the crystal's contents, memorizing facility layouts and command structures. If diplomacy failed, he wanted escape options ready. The following day, Curator Zal arrived with a minimal security detail, requesting privacy for the consultation. Once alone with Ethan and Dr. Isla, the Exalian's formal demeanor subtly shifted. Your demonstration in the arena has accelerated certain evolutionary processes within Alliance governance, Zal stated without preamble. For millennia, the Zaclarian military caste has maintained authority through the elimination of potential competitors. Your species represents a unique variable in this equation. Ethan exchanged glances with Isla. We're not interested in becoming pawns in internal alliance politics. Yet you already are, Zal replied. The question is whether you will be eliminated as pieces or become players in your own right. What exactly do the Exalians want from us? Isla asked directly. Perspective. Zal's iridescent skin rippled with changing patterns, apparently an emotional indicator. The alliance began as a collaborative entity, but has devolved into military hegemony. The observer caste believes this represents evolutionary stagnation rather than progress. And humanity's approach, too. Conflict resolution interests you, Ethan surmised. Your species has navigated the paradox of technological advancement alongside ethical evolution. You developed planet-destroying weapons, yet created systems to prevent their use. Your Lieutenant Cole demonstrated lethal capability alongside moral restraint. Zal moved closer. Such integration of opposing principles suggests potential for genuine balance, something the Alliance has lost. So your test case for Alliance reform? Isla's tone contained both interest and skepticism. Potentially, but time is limited. General Vex Thor has petitioned Central Command for authorization to intercept your approaching fleet. If granted, this would trigger military confrontation that your vessels cannot survive. The implication was clear. They needed to act quickly. What are you proposing? Zal's multifaceted eyes gleamed. A formal diplomatic recognition hearing. With the council divided, ancient protocols can be invoked, allowing species representatives to present their case for status reconsideration. They'd actually listen? Ethan asked skeptically. The procedural mechanisms remain functional, though rarely utilized. More importantly, such proceedings would delay military action until completion. Zal produced a small device that projected a galactic positioning map. Your Earth vessels will reach the outer boundary within 6 days. The recognition hearing would require minimum 3 days preparation, followed by deliberations potentially extending several more. Isla leaned forward, studying the map. What would this hearing entail exactly? Representatives of your species would address the full regional council, presenting evidence of your cultural, technological, and ethical development. You would face questions, some hostile, from various factions. Zal's skin patterns rippled again. Most crucially, you would need to demonstrate that humanity offers value to the Alliance beyond simple assimilation or elimination. And if we're not interested in joining your alliance? Ethan countered. That is technically an option, though statistically unlikely to succeed. The Exalian's tone conveyed what might have been regret. Few species maintain true independence within range of Alliance space. Ethan and Isla exchanged glances. They had limited options and rapidly dwindling time. If we agree to this hearing, Ethan said carefully, what guarantees do we have against simply being detained indefinitely while the Zaclarians intercept our fleet anyway? No absolute guarantees exist, Zal admitted. However, I am authorized to offer observer caste protection during proceedings, a status that even General Vex Thor cannot easily override. We need to consult with the other human captives, Isla insisted. Arrangements will be made. Zal moved toward the exit. Consider carefully, but not excessively. The General's petition advances through command hierarchies as we speak. After the Exalian departed, Ethan activated the crystal once more, searching for information on recognition hearings and observer caste protection protocols. This could be legitimate, Isla said, reviewing the fragmented data. Alliance historical records show 17 cases of species status reclassification through formal hearing. 3 resulted in elevation, 9 in maintenance of current status, and 5. She trailed off. In elimination, Ethan finished grimly. So if it's a gamble, everything's a gamble at this point. But a hearing buys time and gives us a platform. Better than sitting in cells while decisions are made about us. Later that day, they were permitted to meet with the remaining human captives, 14 scientists, engineers, and diplomatic staff who had survived the initial cultural rehabilitation processes. After intense debate, consensus emerged. They would pursue the recognition hearing while simultaneously exploring all escape options. Dr. Isla would lead the scientific presentation, demonstrating humanity's technological achievements. A cultural anthropologist named Miguel Rodriguez would address social evolution and ethical frameworks. Ethan, as the only military officer, would handle questions regarding human defense capabilities and conflict resolution principles. When they informed Zal of their decision, the Exalian moved with surprising speed. Within hours, they were relocated to proper diplomatic quarters and granted limited communication privileges among themselves. Preparation facilities were provided, including access to the information they had brought from Earth, data previously confiscated during processing. As they worked to build their case, an unexpected visitor arrived. Kalrana, still formal but less overtly hostile than before. The recognition hearing proceeds, she stated, entering Ethan's preparation room. I've been assigned as security liaison due to our unique situation. The life debt. Ethan looked up from the display he'd been studying. Indeed, the Council believes our connection ensures you will not attempt escape during proceedings. Her massive frame seemed uncomfortable in the diplomatic setting, away from the battlefield where she clearly belonged. I am to inform you that Zaclarian objections continue. General Vex Thor has requested combat demonstration as part of the hearing. Ethan frowned. What kind of demonstration? Controlled exhibition against Alliance military representatives. He claims your arena victory was anomalous and requires verification. Her scaled face revealed nothing, but her voice carried a warning. Do not be deceived. He seeks to eliminate you personally before your fleet arrives. You have become symbolic. Symbolic of what? Change. The words seemed to discomfort her. The rigid order of our alliance has maintained peace for millennia. Yet many now question whether peace through dominance remains optimal evolution. Ethan studied the warrior thoughtfully. And what do you believe, Kalrana? You spent your life fighting for this system. She stiffened. My beliefs are irrelevant. I serve my function. The function of losing to a human in 30 seconds. Her eyes flashed with renewed anger, then settled into something more complex. Perhaps my function evolves, as does yours. The life debt compels truth, Lieutenant Cole. Prepare thoroughly for the combat demonstration. General Vex Thor has selected elite Zaclarian guards with specific anti-human tactical programming. They've been studying me extensively. She moved toward the door. Tomorrow begins the recognition sequence. Tonight, I recommend you review the cultural satisfaction invocation. The what? A ritual phrase initiating formal proceedings. Failure to recite correctly would invalidate your petition immediately. She almost seemed to smile. Convenient for those opposing your recognition. After she departed, Ethan immediately sought Dr. Isla, who was already working with the xenolinguists in their group, to master the complicated ceremonial language required for the hearing. The combat demonstration is a trap, Ethan explained. But refusing would likely be worse. Isla nodded grimly. Classic power play. We've been studying alliance protocols. Any recognition candidate can be subjected to competency evaluation in their claimed areas of expertise. She pulled up a display showing Zaclarian military formations. They'll use specialized units trained to counter exactly what you showed in the arena. Then I'll need to show something different. The preparation continued through the night. While the scientists assembled technological demonstrations and cultural evidence, Ethan reviewed everything they had on Zaclarian combat tactics. If he was to face specially trained opponents, standard approaches would fail. By morning, the diplomatic section of the Alliance facility had transformed. Delegations from various member species had arrived, their vessels docking at the massive station. The recognition hearing, rare enough to be noteworthy, had attracted significant political attention. The human delegation was escorted to antechambers outside the Grand Council Hall, where they underwent final preparations. Ceremonial attire had been provided, formal garments that resembled a blend of judicial robes and military dress uniforms, tailored for human physiology but incorporating Alliance symbolic elements. Curator Zal appeared briefly, skin patterns shifting rapidly, suggesting agitation or perhaps excitement. The Observer Prime has arrived to witness proceedings. This significantly elevates protocol requirements, but also ensures maximum procedural adherence. Meaning the Zaclarians can't easily cheat. Ethan translated. Correct. However, General Vex Thor has secured approval for the combat demonstration as opening evaluation. The Exalian lowered its voice. Exercise extreme caution, Lieutenant. Accidents during evaluation are not unprecedented. Before Ethan could respond, ceremonial tones echoed through the chamber, signaling commencement. Massive doors swung open, revealing the Grand Council Hall, a vast amphitheater filled with hundreds of representatives from across the Alliance. The hall's design emphasized hierarchy, with concentric rings rising upward. The lowest tier contained administrative personnel, the middle tiers housed member species delegations, and the uppermost ring seated the High Council itself. At the center stood a circular platform where petitioners would present their case. As the human delegation moved forward, Ethan noted strategic positioning throughout the hall. The Zaclarian military contingent occupied a prominent section to the right, their armored forms radiating barely contained hostility. Directly opposite sat the Observer caste, distinguished by their iridescent appearance and minimalist attire. Various other species filled the remaining spaces, their attention focused entirely on the humans. At the highest point of the chamber sat a figure that could only be the Observer Prime, larger than other Exalians, with skin that shifted through colors invisible in normal spectrum. Beside this enigmatic being, the Zaclarian High Commander matched its imposing presence, scales gleaming with metallic implants signifying supreme military authority. Dr. Isla stepped forward first, raising her hands in the precise gesture they had practiced. In carefully measured tones, she recited the cultural satisfaction invocation, a complex phrase acknowledging Alliance sovereignty while asserting the petitioner's right to recognition. A moment of tense silence followed as the hall's translation systems processed and verified the ritual language. Then a resonant tone confirmed acceptance, and the proceedings officially began. The formal introduction of a human delegation had just concluded when General Vex Thor rose from his position, imposing even among his Zaclarian colleagues. Before evidence presentation commences, the military division requests competency evaluation as permitted under Recognition Protocol 7 Alpha. His amplified voice carried throughout the chamber. The human representative Coleman. Cole, Ethan corrected automatically, has claimed combat proficiency as defining characteristic of human adaptability. Verification is required. The Observer Prime made a subtle gesture, and a smaller Exalian spokesperson addressed the assembly. The request falls within procedural parameters. However, evaluation must maintain proportional risk appropriate to demonstration rather than punitive intent. Vex Thor's scales rippled with what might have been amusement. Of course, 3 evaluators will be provided, armed with standard training implements. Containment fields will prevent serious injury. The emphasis on serious did not go unnoticed. Ethan stepped forward, maintaining diplomatic composure despite the obvious setup. I accept the evaluation parameters. Murmurs rippled through the assembly as a section of the central platform reconfigured, transforming into a combat arena approximately 10 meters in diameter. Shimmering barriers rose around its perimeter, the containment fields Vex Thor had mentioned. 3 Zaclarian warriors entered from a side chamber, each standing nearly 7 feet tall and wearing lightweight combat armor. They carried training weapons, staff-like implements that delivered incapacitating energy pulses rather than lethal force, though Ethan harbored no illusions about how incapacitating might be interpreted. The evaluation test's response to multiple opposition, Vex Thor announced. Candidate will demonstrate the adaptability claimed as human evolutionary advantage. Ethan removed his ceremonial outer robe, stepping onto the platform in the simpler garments beneath. He noted the positioning of the 3 warriors. They had adopted a triangular formation specifically designed to counter the techniques he'd used against Kalrana. The evaluation commenced with a single tone. Immediately, the 3 Zaclarians moved with coordinated precision, clearly having trained extensively together. Their formation maintained perfect spacing, eliminating the possibility of isolating individual opponents. Ethan remained motionless in the center, apparently passive as they closed in. Whispers spread through the assembly. Was the human frozen in fear? Had the arena victory truly been anomalous? The first strike came from behind, the Zaclarian lunging with practiced speed. Instead of dodging or blocking as expected, Ethan dropped flat to the platform surface. The warrior's momentum carried it forward over him, momentarily disrupting the triangular formation. In that split second, Ethan rolled and sprang upward, driving his shoulder into the momentarily unbalanced Zaclarian's midsection, a different technique than he'd used in the arena, but equally effective against bipedal opponents regardless of size. The warrior staggered, but didn't fall, quickly re-establishing position with its companions. They adjusted formation, now moving more cautiously, probing for weaknesses rather than committing to direct attacks. Ethan circled slowly, maintaining equal distance from each opponent. His expression remained calm, focused, revealing nothing of his internal calculations. The human delays, Vex Thor called from the observation platform. Evaluators increased pressure. The warriors responded immediately, tightening their formation and coordinating simultaneous strikes from multiple angles. Staff weapons lashed out in blurring arcs, forcing Ethan into defensive maneuvers. He blocked the first strike, dodged a second, but the third caught him across the shoulder, sending a painful energy pulse through his body. Spectators from various delegations reacted with mixed sounds of concern and satisfaction. Rather than retreat, Ethan moved toward the pain directly, engaging the warrior who had struck him. This unexpected response created momentary confusion. The Zaclarians had anticipated human evasive preferences based on arena observations. Ethan seized the hesitation, grappling with the central warrior while using its larger mass as a shield against its companions. His grappling technique emphasized leverage rather than strength, targeting joints and balance points that remained vulnerable even in reptilian physiology. The warrior found itself being controlled despite its superior strength, its own mass becoming a liability as Ethan executed a modified judo throw. The Zaclarian crashed into one of its companions, sending both tumbling against the containment field. The third warrior advanced cautiously, weapon raised. Ethan had positioned himself to maintain visual contact with all three opponents, no longer allowing them to utilize their numerical advantage effectively. As the fallen warriors recovered, Ethan's strategy became clear to the observing delegations. He wasn't attempting to defeat three opponents simultaneously, but disrupting their coordinated advantage to create manageable individual encounters. The demonstration continued for nearly 3 minutes, significantly longer than his arena combat with Kal Rana. Throughout, Ethan displayed not a single repeated pattern. Each engagement utilized different techniques, different responses, making it impossible for the Zaclarians to anticipate his movements. Finally, after Ethan had successfully incapacitated one warrior and neutralized the effectiveness of the remaining two, a resonant tone signaled the evaluation's conclusion. General Vexthor's expression had darkened considerably, scales flushed with physiological indicators of rage. The demonstration had failed to discredit the human's capabilities as he had clearly hoped. The Observer Prime made another subtle gesture, and the Exalian spokesperson announced, "Combat evaluation criteria satisfied. The delegation may proceed with formal evidence presentation." As Ethan stepped from the platform, rejoining his human colleagues, he noticed Kal Rana watching from the Thar delegation section. Though her expression remained carefully neutral, he detected what might have been approval in her posture. The recognition hearing continued for 3 full days. The human delegation presented extensive evidence of Earth's technological development, cultural evolution, and diplomatic philosophy. Dr. Isla delivered compelling arguments regarding humanity's potential contributions to Alliance knowledge, while Miguel Rodriguez demonstrated parallels between human ethical development and Alliance foundational principles. Throughout the proceedings, Vexthor and his faction raised continuous objections, focusing particularly on Earth's history of internal warfare and environmental mismanagement. Dr. Isla countered with evidence of humanity's capacity for self-correction and adaptation, an evolutionary advantage rather than liability. On the final day, as deliberations neared completion, an urgent communication interrupted proceedings. A Zaclarian monitoring officer entered the chamber, approaching General Vexthor directly. The general's reaction was immediate and unmistakable, scales darkening as he rose to address the assembly. "The approaching Earth vessels have accelerated," he announced. "They will reach Alliance boundary within 12 hours rather than the projected 36. This constitutes clear, aggressive intent." Chaos erupted throughout the chamber as delegations conferred urgently. The human representatives exchanged alarmed glances. Something had forced their fleet to accelerate the timetable. Curator Zhao approached them hurriedly. "What explanation can you offer? This development severely undermines your position." "We have no communication with the fleet," Ethan reminded them. "But standard protocol would only mandate acceleration under threat conditions." "Are you suggesting they perceive threat from the Alliance?" Zhao's skin patterns indicated distress. Before Ethan could respond, Kal Rana appeared at his side. "Lieutenant Cole, you must address the assembly immediately. General Vexthor is mobilizing defensive fleet positions." The Observer Prime made a commanding gesture, and the chamber quieted. Through its spokesperson, the Prime requested the human delegation's response to these developments. Ethan stepped onto the central platform, aware that the next moments might determine not just their personal fates, but potentially the first interstellar war involving Earth. "Honored representatives," he began, projecting calm authority. "Without direct communication, I cannot state with certainty why our vessels have altered course. However, I can offer the most probable explanation based on Earth protocols." He paused, carefully considering his next words. Standard procedures would mandate acceleration only if the advance team, meaning us, failed to establish regular communication or if active threat were detected. Vexthor interrupted. The human admits their vessels advance with hostile intent. I said no such thing, Ethan countered firmly. Our protocols are defensive, not aggressive. The fleet likely detects your military vessels positioning across their approach vector, a positioning you initiated, General, not them. The Observer Prime spokesperson addressed General Vexthor directly. Has the Zaclarian Military Division deployed combat vessels beyond standard patrol patterns? The general's hesitation confirmed what Ethan had suspected. Vexthor had already mobilized forces, potentially without full council authorization. Routine security adjustments only, the general finally responded. Prudent given unverified approaching vessels. Tensions escalated as various delegations demanded clarification of military deployments and human intentions. The recognition hearing had transformed into crisis management, with the imminent possibility of armed confrontation. In this critical moment, an unexpected intervention occurred. Kalrana stepped onto the platform beside Ethan, her imposing presence drawing immediate attention. As bound witness through sacred life debt, she announced formally, I invoke ancient protocol of intermediary resolution. The Thar Dominion offers neutral ground for direct communication between human fleet and Alliance representatives. The declaration stunned the assembly. The protocol she had invoked was archaic but remained technically valid, a mechanism from the Alliance's early formation, designed to prevent unnecessary conflicts through mediated first contact. The Observer Prime's spokesperson responded almost immediately. The invocation is recognized and accepted by the Observer Cast. All eyes turned to General Vexthor, whose opposition would reveal naked aggression rather than defensive concern. Trapped by protocol and observation, he grudgingly acknowledged the invocation. The military division accepts intermediary resolution, provided full security protocols remain active. Within hours, arrangements were finalized. A Thar diplomatic vessel would transport representatives from both the Alliance Council and the human delegation to meet the Earth fleet at the boundary of Alliance space. The Observer Prime would personally attend, elevating the encounter to highest diplomatic status. As they prepared to depart, Kalrana approached Ethan privately. The life debt compelled intervention, she stated, though her tone suggested something beyond mere obligation. Your species' survival remains uncertain, but conflict has been temporarily averted. Thank you, Ethan replied simply. Her expression softened marginally. In the arena, you demonstrated unfamiliar principles. Now, perhaps, others will witness alternatives to elimination and dominance. The journey to the rendezvous coordinates took approximately 6 hours aboard the Thar vessel. During transit, Dr. Isla worked with Curator Zal to prepare appropriate greeting protocols, while Ethan studied tactical displays showing both the approaching Earth fleet and the Zaclarian vessels that had been strategically positioned in response. General Vexthor remained coldly professional throughout, though his ongoing communication with Zaclarian command vessels suggested contingency planning should diplomacy fail. As they neared the designated coordinates, the Thar vessel dropped from faster-than-light travel. Through the observation viewport, they could see the Earth fleet in the distance. 6 ships in defensive formation, advanced but noticeably less massive than the Zaclarian vessels shadowing their approach. Communications were established, and a wave of emotion swept through the human delegation as familiar voices responded from the lead Earth vessel. Alliance diplomatic vessel. This is Admiral Chun of Earth Fleet Vanguard. We are responding to distress protocols initiated by our advance team. Please verify the status of our personnel. Before anyone could respond, General Vexthor interjected. Distress protocols? Your personnel transmitted no such signal. Ethan exchanged glances with Dr. Isla, understanding dawning. The memory crystal she had accessed had triggered automated emergency beacons, likely without her knowledge. The Observer Prime gestured for silence, then approached the communication array. Through translation systems, its first direct communication resonated. Earth vessels, this is the Observer Prime of the Galactic Alliance. Recent events have revealed significant misunderstandings between our civilizations. Your personnel currently participate in formal recognition proceedings that will determine future relations. A pause followed as the Earth fleet processed this information. We request visual confirmation of our personnel's safety, Admiral Chin responded firmly. The communication system activated holographic projection, allowing Ethan to address his compatriots directly. Admiral, this is Lieutenant Ethan Cole. Our situation has evolved from captivity to diplomatic engagement. The current meeting represents a critical turning point in human alliance relations. He continued, explaining the complex political dynamics at play and the opportunity presented by the Observer Prime's direct involvement. Though he maintained diplomatic language, he incorporated pre-established code phrases confirming both genuine diplomacy potential and ongoing security concerns. Admiral Chin acknowledged the nuanced message. We propose immediate joint conference to establish mutual security protocols while recognition proceedings continue. The Observer Prime accepted this proposal without hesitation, much to General Vex Thor's visible displeasure. Within hours, a precedent-setting meeting between Earth Fleet representatives and the Alliance Council delegation was underway aboard the neutral Thar vessel. The negotiations proved intensive but productive. Admiral Chun, a seasoned diplomat as well as military leader, navigated the complex Alliance political landscape with impressive adaptability. The Earth Fleet would maintain position outside Alliance territory while recognition proceedings concluded, with Thar vessels serving as neutral intermediaries for ongoing communication. Most significantly, the Observer Prime proposed an exchange of diplomatic personnel. Alliance representatives would visit Earth while human observers would be welcomed at various Alliance facilities. This approach, revolutionary by Alliance standards, received support from multiple member species despite Seclarian objections. As formal agreements were finalized, Ethan found himself standing beside Kalrana, watching the Earth and Alliance delegations interact. Your Admiral impresses, she observed. Few species adapt so quickly to Alliance complexity. Humans specialize in adaptation, Ethan replied. It's how we've survived our own history. She considered this. The life debt between us nears fulfillment through this intermediary resolution. Our traditions would consider balance restored. And then, traditionally, paths separate. However, she seemed to struggle with unfamiliar concepts. Recent events suggest traditional paths may not represent optimal evolution. Ethan smiled slightly. Are you suggesting the mighty Thar warrior might have something to learn from humans? Perhaps mutual learning, she countered. Your mercy in the arena revealed alternative strength. Our intermediary resolution prevented unnecessary conflict. Her posture straightened with characteristic pride. The Thar delegation has requested permission to establish permanent diplomatic presence on Earth. Cultural exchange, rather than cultural rehabilitation? Precisely. For the first time, she offered what appeared to be a genuine smile. Fearsome with its display of predatory teeth, yet undeniably warm. Evolution continues through adaptation, not merely dominance. As the diplomatic proceedings concluded, arrangements were made for the human captives to return to Earth aboard their fleet vessels. The recognition hearing would continue with newly appointed representatives, while Alliance diplomatic teams prepared for their historic journey to Earth. In the Thar vessel's departure bay, Curator Zhao approached Ethan for a final conversation. Your demonstration in the arena created ripples that continue to expand, the Exalien observed. The Observer caste has studied thousands of species across millennia, yet few have catalyzed such rapid, systemic reconsideration. We didn't come looking for conflict or revolution, Ethan noted. Just peaceful contact. Perhaps that is precisely what makes your species valuable. You carry the capacity for both devastating warfare and profound compassion, and the wisdom to choose between them. Zal's skin patterns shifted through combinations Ethan hadn't seen before. The reconfiguration I mentioned earlier has begun. The Alliance will evolve, with or without Seclarian approval. As Ethan prepared to board the Earth transport shuttle, a final unexpected farewell occurred. General Vexthor approached, his military escort maintaining careful distance. Lieutenant Cole, the general acknowledged stiffly. The Zaclarian High Command wishes to convey that observation of human military capabilities will continue. I wouldn't expect anything less, Ethan replied evenly. You have disrupted established order that maintained peace for centuries. The general's tone carried unmistakable warning. Such disruption rarely concludes with initial diplomatic agreements. Are you threatening Earth, General? Merely stating historical precedent. New species often mistake initial accommodation for permanent acceptance. Vexthor's scales darkened. This game you have initiated has only begun. With that ominous farewell, the general departed, leaving Ethan with the unsettling certainty that humanity's challenges within the galactic community were just beginning. Aboard the Earth flagship several hours later, Ethan stood at a viewport watching the Alliance station recede into the distance. Admiral Chin joined him, offering a steaming cup of coffee, the first real Earth beverage he'd tasted in months. Your reports make for fascinating reading, Lieutenant, the Admiral commented. Particularly your arena encounter. 30 seconds to defeat their champion? That's already becoming legend among the crew. Ethan sipped the coffee gratefully. Just applied training, Admiral. The right technique at the right moment. And the right principle at the right moment, Chin added. Your refusal to kill may have prevented interstellar war. For now, Ethan murmured, recalling Vexthor's parting words. Indeed, our intelligence suggests the Zaclarians won't easily surrender their dominant position. They've apparently begun mobilizing resources in frontier sectors beyond direct observer cast monitoring. Ethan nodded grimly. We've won a battle, but a much larger conflict lies ahead. The Admiral gazed thoughtfully at the stars beyond the viewport. Not necessarily armed conflict. Cultural, philosophical, political challenges, equally dangerous but perhaps more worthy of our best efforts. As Earth's vessels accelerated away from Alliance space, Ethan considered this perspective. Humanity had entered the galactic stage not through overwhelming military might, but through demonstrated adaptability, the capacity to defeat opponents without destroying them, to transform enemies into allies, to introduce alternative evolutionary paths beyond simple dominance hierarchies. Whether those alternatives would ultimately prevail remained uncertain. But for the first time since their disastrous first contact, possibility existed. And possibility, as humanity had proven throughout its turbulent history, was often enough to change everything.